Justice, Truth, and Peace, the Mishnah and the Talmud, circa 200 to circa 500 CE. In context, focus divine law. Before 516 BC, King Cyrus of Persia allowed the Jews exiled in Babylon to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. 70 CE, following a Jewish revolt, the Romans sacked Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. After circa 1070 to 1105 in France, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki, or Rashi, writes a commentary on the Talmud. 1240, the Talmud is put on trial in Paris and condemned for blasphemy. Every copy in France is burned. 1519 to 1523 in Venice, Italy, Daniel Bomberg publishes the first printed copy of the Babylonian Talmud. The Talmud, or study, is a written compendium of Jewish oral laws that govern every part of a devout Jew's life. Made up of the Mishnah and Gemara, it is the central text of Rabbinic Judaism, which emerged after the Romans destroyed the temple in Jerusalem in 70, and is the mainstream form of Judaism. The Romans ruled Jerusalem and the surrounding province of Judah from the 1st century BC onward, at first through client kings and later through governors. In the 1st century BC, Judaism divided into rival forms, each taking a different attitude toward Jewish law. Temple worship was overseen by the Sadducees, aristocratic priests who believed only in the written law outlined in the Torah of Moses. Pharisees, on the other hand, believed in the stricter observance of Jewish law than the Sadducees. They argued that purity laws applied not only to priests but to the daily lives of all Jewish people. The Pharisees derived their beliefs from an oral tradition that had accrued over time. In the words of Romano-Jewish historian Josephus, the Pharisees have delivered to the people a great many observances by succession from their fathers which are not written in the law of Moses, and for that reason it is that the Sadducees reject them. One of the Pharisees' innovations was a belief that at the end of time God would resurrect the dead, punish the wicked, and reward the just. The Sadducees rejected this idea of an afterlife. In 70, following a Jewish rebellion, the Romans besieged and captured Jerusalem and razed the temple to the ground. The Sadducees disappeared from history. The loss of the temple was a catastrophe for Jews in the ancient world. It was inconceivable to imagine a religion without a temple, and Jerusalem's temple was the only place on earth where Jews could offer sacrifices to atone for sin. Preserving Judaism. It was largely thanks to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, a Jewish scholar, that Judaism was able to continue without a temple. He persuaded the Romans to let him re-establish the Sanhedrin, the Jewish High Council, in Yavne. Citing Hosea chapter 6, verse 6 in the Torah, I desired mercy, not sacrifice, Zakkai convinced the Sanhedrin that the animal sacrifice, the preserved temple worship, could be replaced by prayer, study of the law, and benevolence. This was justified in the Talmud with the saying of God to King David, a single day in which you sit engaged in Torah is preferable to 1,000 burnt offerings that your son Solomon will offer before me on the altar. After a second Jewish rebellion in 132 to 136, Emperor Hadrian expelled all Jews from Jerusalem, which was rebuilt as a Roman city. To preserve Judaism, rabbis compiled a code of laws written in Hebrew called the Mishnah, repeating or teaching, completed in 200 by Rabbi Judah Hanasi. The book is the oldest part of the Talmud. Based on the oral tradition of the Pharisees, the Mishnah is divided into 6 seder, or orders. These in turn are subdivided into between 7 and 12 tractates, books, which cover every part of Jewish life. One of these tractates, Bidkei Avot, sayings of the fathers, trace the oral tradition through a line of authorities all the way back to Moses and Sinai. Building a virtual temple. The subject of Mishnah's 5th order, Kodashim, was the Temple of Jerusalem. The writers lovingly described every detail of the lost building of the sacrificial process. This was so that temple worship could continue to be at the center of Jewish religious life. According to the Talmud, he who engages in study of the laws of sacrifice should be regarded as if he had offered up a sacrifice himself. Since 70, Jews have prayed daily for the temple to be restored by God and for worship to resume there, so the study of the temple is also a way of preparing for the future. Alongside the Mishnah, the Talmud includes the Gemara, or completion, a much longer commentary written by later rabbis in Aramaic, which was the everyday spoken language of the time. 2 different Gemaras were created, a Palestinian version compiled between 350 and 400, and a Babylonian one written between 350 and 550 CE. The latter version is much longer and is seen as having greater authority. The Gemara is a vast body of diverse material that explores the meaning of the laws outlined in the Mishnah and their application in daily life. Unlike most law codes, it often presents contradictory rulings by rabbis side by side without deciding between them. Rather than fixing Jewish law, the Gemara enabled it to be studied and argued over it, and has been described as the first interactive text. The Babylonian Talmud, made up of the Mishnah and the Babylonian Gemara, spread widely within the Islamic world where Jews had a protected status. Following the Muslim conquest of Spain in the 8th century, the city of Cordoba became a center of Jewish learning. Halakha, Jewish law derived from the Talmud, influenced the development of Sharia, Islamic law. Unlike Christianity, whose laws were made by councils or synods, Jewish and Muslim laws were derived through scholarship. Both systems regulate every part of daily life, and both combine laws based on the divinely inspired book, the Torah and Quran, respectively, with later oral traditions. Moses received the Torah at Sinai and transmitted it to Joshua, the elders to the prophets, and the prophets to the men of the Great Assembly. B'tekei Avot. The Talmud on trial. From Spain, the Talmud spread to Christian Europe, where schools were established in major cities. Europe's rulers knew nothing about the Talmud, assuming that Jews only studied the Torah of Moses. In 1238, Nicholas Donin, a French Jew who had converted to Christianity and became a Franciscan friar, denounced the Talmud. He told Pope Gregory IX that the Talmud was offensive and blasphemous, and that without it the Jews would have converted to Christianity a long time ago. On March 3, 1240, King Louis IX of France had every copy of the Talmud in the country seized and brought to Paris, where the book was put on trial for blasphemy. Donin prosecuted and 4 leading rabbis defended the Talmud. Donin had found passages referring to a Yeshu, Jesus, a false prophet who was the son of a prostitute and should be justly executed. The rabbis answered that this was not Jesus Christ but another man, saying, "Not every Louis born in France is king." The Talmud was condemned and sentenced to be burned. The manuscripts were carried through the streets of Paris in 24 wagon loads to a great bonfire. As a result of this and subsequent public burnings elsewhere in Christian Europe, very few complete manuscripts of the Talmud have survived. O dreadful and terrible day! Sun and moon are dark and the heavens shattered, the stars driven away, the universe mourns. A Hebrew account of the trial of the Talmud. Studying the Talmud. The traditional way to study the Talmud was in male-only pairs. Students read a page and argued over its meaning. As the Gemara explains, where Torah scholars study together, they sharpen one another. Today, women also explore the book in yeshivas, Jewish schools dedicated to the study of the Talmud, Torah, and other religious texts. People now read the Talmud online too, using live streaming or video conferencing, and websites to offer to find students at Haravota, a learning partner. In 1923, Meir Shapiro, a Polish rabbi, suggested that Jews around the world should study the Talmud collectively at the rate of 1 page a day. This idea was embraced, and tens of thousands of Jews began to read the book together. It took 7.5 years for them to read the Talmud, a cycle first completed in February 1931. The 13th cycle ended in 2020. Today, around 350,000 Jews take part in the collective reading. Rashi. Born in Troyes, near northern France in 1040, Rabbi Shlomo Yazaki, known as Rashi, was the most influential Talmudic commentator in history. As a young man, he studied in the yeshiva at Worms in Germany. At the age of 25, he returned to Troyes and became a rabbi while also working as a winemaker. He founded a yeshiva of his own 5 years later. Rashi wrote extensive commentaries about the Torah and the Babylonian Talmud. His writing was clear and concise, and he analyzed the text phrase by phrase. Although he wrote in Hebrew, he explained the meaning of obscure words in French. Rashi died in 1105 in Troyes. Ever since the Babylonian Talmud was first printed in the 1520s, every copy of the work has included Rashi's commentary on the inner margin of each page.